Hey, my name is Greg, and I've spent hundreds of dollars hacking with Claude Code over the last couple of months. It's become sort of my default coding agent whenever I'm starting new projects, or especially if I'm working on an older project that has a larger code base. Last week, OpenAI launched their Codex CLI, and I was really excited to try it out. So I tried both Claude Code and OpenAI's Codex out head-to-head on a couple different projects. I'll kind of go against YouTube best practices here and just spoil it. Codex fell pretty short, and it was disappointing. And so in the rest of the video, I'm going to share my opinion on what OpenAI needs to do to bring Codex up to the same standard that Claude Code's at now. And I honestly, I think there's some simple fixes having to do with the developer experience. Before we get into this, I want to preface this by saying I am wearing my OpenAI Dev Day hoodie. I've been hacking on OpenAI's APIs, starting with the GPT-3 text completion endpoint. OpenAI has shipped some of the best developer experiences that I've ever encountered in my career. I have a number of former colleagues and friends from Twilio who work there now. I generally don't want this channel or really anything I do to be about criticizing other people because shipping stuff is really hard. I only feel comfortable critiquing this because I know that OpenAI's bar for developer experiences has historically been really high, and this one just sort of fell surprisingly short. So let's talk a little bit about a few points of the developer experience. When I personally start up Codex, I'm given a message that O4 is not available to me. My account is tier 5. The announcement said that O4 should be rolled out to all tier 5 accounts. So they've set my expectations at here. They're delivering at here with no explanation of the gap. But Codex, though, does ship with O4 MIDI being the default, and it does enough checking to let me know that I don't have access to that model. But why doesn't it just fall back to a model that works then? Instead, if I try to chat with O4 MIDI, it just fails. Okay, fine. I guess I need to change my model. It's not obvious on the screen how I do that, but it does say I can type /help here. So I'll type /help. All right, cool. There's a /model command. Let's choose /model. Oh my gosh. Which model am I supposed to choose from here? Do I want Babbage? Do I want GPT 3.5? I follow these things pretty closely, and I'm pretty sure that of this list, O3 Mini is the best option for me. And I'm pretty sure that O3 Mini is better than this dated version of O3 Mini. I'm pretty sure that O3 Mini is going to point to the latest one, but I'm only like 90% sure. But hey, let's just for shits and giggles, let's choose one of the older ones. Let's try Babbage. This is before my day. Let's just try Babbage and play it. Oh man, and it fails. All right, well, let's try one of these newer models. Oh, look, that fails too. Well, let's try one of these other models that, it's weird that Dolly's in here, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like we're going to do image generation here. Let's try that one. That fails as well. Why are all of these models listed here if they don't work with this product? Like, this just baffles me. This is an if statement. This is 30 minutes of work. This is like if you had a couple dozen people trying this feedback would have been surfaced. And so I think this sort of thing is the thing that frustrated me most coming from OpenAI, because this just sort of feels like wasting people's time in order to get some headlines. And I don't, that maybe that's not it, but that's what it feels like from my perspective, is I haven't even gotten started yet, and I'm having to make these decisions. And it's like trying to pick which door has the death trap and which one leads to the happy place. And I feel like a developer should never have to make that decision just simply to get to hello world with your product. API key management. When you boot up Claude Code, it's going to ask you to OAuth into your account. And then it's going to set up your API key and store it away into a configuration file for you. Codex, on the other hand, expects you to set the API key as an environment variable, specifically either as a global environment variable or as a .env and a .env in the project that you're working in. This is very similar to how you would set the API key if you were just going to use the OpenAI API in one of your projects. But that doesn't actually make sense for this tool. I really like how Anthropic expects you to spin up a second API key, or I think even a separate project for Claude Code, because the usage is different, right? And so if I've set an OpenAI API key in my project, that means, I have some code in that project that's using the OpenAI API, and it's using that API key. And I don't want the usage of the coding tool to spend against that same API key. Also, I really don't like the idea that you need to set a global OpenAI API key for if you want to use this across all of your projects. So now there's this OpenAI API key just like hanging out in your environment all the time that could be snagged by any script that's running locally or any app I suspect that's running. And so it just seems like unnecessarily insecure. There's really not a good option with Codex to create an API key that's solely dedicated to the usage of Codex, and then to store it in a persistent way that you can use it across all of the different projects you might be working on. And Claude Code makes this super easy. Cost management. So as I mentioned, Claude Code, if there's any major complaint of it, is that it can get expensive compared to what developers are used to paying in order to write code, but still, probably pretty good value compared to hiring a human to do it. And they know this, and so they give you a couple of options to manage the cost over the course of your session. The first is /cost. At any point in time, you can run the /cost command, and you can see how much you've spent during this coding session. This is really, really useful. 2, they give you the /compact command, right? So it's just basically taking everything you've done, bullet pointing it, and then significantly reducing or compacting the context with a summary so that Claude Code still knows what's happened, but it's able to know that with much, much smaller requests. So each request is going to be a lot less expensive. Codex does none of this. There's no way on any given session to figure out how much you've spent, and there is no concept of compacting your history. Project context. When you start up Claude, it does a scan of your directory that you're in, of your code base, and it tries to gain an understanding of your code base. And then you run this /init command and write what it's learned about the code base to a claude.md file, so it doesn't need to do that analysis every single time. You can also give it instructions on, your formatting preferences, on just coding conventions that you're going to use in the project, so that you're not starting from scratch every time you start this up. Codex, when you start it up, it does nothing. It just basically gives you a text box to chat with whatever model you have chosen. It doesn't take any initiative to understand your code base, to understand what's going on. Now, once you initiate the chat, it will, but I really love the idea that since this is a coding agent, since you ran it in a specific directory, it can assume that you want it to understand your code base before you start working with it. So why not go ahead and start doing that? And then once you have started doing that, why not, in order to save costs and save time, write what you've learned to a standardized file so you don't have to repeat that process every time. 5th is just the UI. Claude Code is a really, really nicely designed CLI. And there's a lot of subtleties in Claude Codes, like the way that they separate the output versus your section down below where you're going to do the input, the way they do the syntax highlighting, just the colors they've used. It feels like a very intentional product. By contrast, Codex feels sort of like the minimum viable design. Instead of a single line that shows how long you've been waiting, it just has sort of a console log that outputs every few seconds saying, okay, now you waited for 24 seconds. Now you waited for 26 seconds. And it just scrolls. There's no clear visual delineation between where the user does their input and the output of the agent. There's not a lot of good color contrast. Claude Code even has some nice considerations to change the color scheme if you're colorblind. Codex does not have this. So again, it just feels like this was the minimum possible that could be done, and then it was pushed out. This thing crashes. I've never had Claude Code crash on me. Once I switched over to O3 Mini, it has crashed multiple times on me. Just hard crash, and then to start it back up again, I got to go through and set all the same preferences again, and I lose all the context and everything. And it's just sort of feels like table stakes. And it's super, super frustrating, and it just feels like it's not ready. MCP support. You now can add MCP servers to Claude Code. So one great use case that I learned about on a Claude Code webinar last week was using the Puppeteer MCP server to control a browser. So you can ask Claude Code to make changes, and then you can have it control a browser to view those changes, and it sort of closes the loop on the feedback cycle. Once you add MCP servers to these tools, it just really opens up the world of possibilities of what you can do with them. Speaking of that webinar, I don't remember the last time I sat in on a webinar for a software product, but I've used Claude Code so much and that I wanted to participate and learn how to get more use out of it. And so the seminar from Anthropic was called The Origin Story of Claude Code and Best Practices. And so I'm like, I'm in. And there was something they said that was interesting there. They said Claude Code started off as an internal tool, and then when they released it internally, they saw adoption internally just sort of go up and to the right. And so they said, okay, there must be something here, and they polished it up. And once they got it to the right place, then they released it out into the open. And even today, like, it's how many developers inside of Anthropic, do their daily coding tasks. You can tell from the polish that people internally had used Claude Code before it made it to market. And you can tell from the polish that very few people used OpenAI's Codex CLI before it came to market. Really, just like a week or two of internal use and a little bit of intentionality, this could be so much better. And notice here, I have said nothing about this tool's ability to solve coding problems. It is very possible that O4 Mini plus Codex would solve my developer problems with far more reliability at a fraction of the cost of Claude Code. But I never got there because it was so frustrating to use it, and because it kept crashing on me, and because I don't have access to the latest and greatest models, but I don't know why.